So, if you are someone that's been working with adults with mental disabilities, whether it be in the school system, whether you've worked in a group home as a nurse, and you have seen there's a great need for additional supports, additional providers, but you have been held up by the licensing process, this video is definitely for you. Before you give up, and decide, it's just too much, it's, very difficult, this video is definitely for you. Okay, so today I want to talk about the part on the application, the licensing application, where it says you need to put the address of your facility. So I know the first question that comes up in people's mind is, how the heck am I going to get a facility when I don't even know if I've been approved for licensing? How am I going to get around this? Okay, before you get in the panic, there are certain ways of prolonging, dishing out money for a facility that you're not going to use just yet. Okay, so I have a couple of different ways you can go about that. Number one is you always want to have a letter of intent when you go searching for properties, especially commercial properties. You want to have a letter of intent, and in that letter of intent, you want to include things that will prolong you paying out rent. So number one, you want to ask for rent abatement, okay? You want to ask for a couple of months of rent abatement where you don't have to pay rent, because you have to go through the certification process. You have to have inspections done. Fire departments need to come out and do their part, occupancy and things of that nature. So you want to make sure you add in there a couple of months of rent abatement, which will prolong you it's essentially free rent for a couple of months, okay? Number two, you want to make sure you're not paying security deposits or any type of payments until all tenant improvements have been done. So if the property requires tenant improvements, you want to make sure that gets started while you're going through the certification process. And during that time, you want to make sure you're not paying out any security deposit, that's all being paid once the tenant improvements have been done. You've signed off and you're good with the tenant improvements. So, tenant improvements sometimes takes a few months in itself. So that will be an additional prolonging of your rent. You want to ensure that the rent abatement and the delay that you're going to be paying out your security deposits are separate. You don't want your new landlord to think that the rent abatement was to cover their tenant improvement. The rent abatement is something completely separate. You're asking for 2 months of additional free rent on top of while you're waiting those months out for the tenant improvement, okay? And you want to make sure you include all of this in your letter of intent that's being provided to the landlord. Another thing I want to just sidebar include, those are the two major things, but I also want you to always negotiate rent. Once you lay your eyes on the property, this property meets state requirements, and you want to move forward with this property, always negotiate your rent, okay? Whatever the rent is, make sure it's, a rent that you're comfortable with and you're not settling on the number that they gave you. Even if they say there's a ton of people who have their eyes on this property, you always still want to negotiate the rent, okay? And another thing is, you want to make sure your lease terms is a good amount of time. That's why you need to do your financial projections to see, the amount of individuals that you plan on having in this building and how much revenue you can obtain with this particular building, because you want to make sure that you have an extended lease terms. 5 years will put you in a good point of negotiating. The longer your lease is, the more upper hand you have when it comes to negotiations. So, 3 to 5 years or longer is a great point to start, where put you in a good hand where you can negotiate that rent abatement. You can negotiate those lease, the base rent amount. You can negotiate the tenant improvement that's required in the building, because if you plan on being there a long time, they're going to want the building to be everything that you need it to be. So, just along those lines of tenant improvement, you also want to make sure that, you negotiate the landlord paying for most of those tenant improvements, especially if you have a long-term lease. It could work into both of you all's benefits. So if you were worried about, getting this building and figuring out how you're going to delay payments before the licensing is approved, I hope these hints were helpful for you. If you're somebody that's having trouble with the licensing process and you would like a little extra support in getting through that licensing process, I will attach a link below. Definitely reach out to me. I help people, get through the licensing process without delay, without pulling all your hair out, without getting too much gray hairs. I've been through the licensing process, and I can support you through it. So reach out to me. See you guys next time. Bye.